The first thing you notice about room 417 is the silence. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty hotel room, but the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. I've worked at the Grand Palmer Hotel for 15 years, and I've learned that silence here has texture, has weight. Sometimes it even has eyes. I remember the first time I felt something was wrong with 417. I was doing my usual evening rounds, checking the vacant rooms before the night shift took over. The door was locked as it should have been, but the electronic keycard reader was glowing green. Active. Someone was inside. The thing is, room 417 hadn't been booked in 3 months. Not since Mrs. Caldwell's incident, when she ran screaming down the hallway at 3 a.m., babbling about voices in the walls and faces in the mirrors. We'd written it off as too much wine and grief over her recent divorce. But now, standing before that softly humming green light, I wasn't so sure. I knocked, following protocol. No answer. I used my master key, pushed the door open slowly. The room was pristine, untouched, but it wasn't empty. The air felt dense, like walking through honey, and it was cold enough to see my breath. In February, in Florida. The bathroom mirror caught my eye. It wasn't fogged, despite the cold, but something about its surface seemed wrong. The reflection wasn't quite synchronized with reality. When I turned my head, my reflection delayed by a fraction of a second, like a video call with poor connection. That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, guests would book room 417, but none would stay the night. They'd request room changes, citing strange occurrences. Items moving on their own. Whispers in the dark, the sensation of being watched. One guest swore she woke to find an elderly woman sitting in the armchair, knitting with invisible yarn. When she blinked, the woman was gone, but the chair was warm to the touch. I started keeping a log. The incidents followed patterns. The activity always peaked between 2 and 4 a.m. The room temperature would drop dramatically, sometimes by 20 degrees. Electronic devices would malfunction, but in strange ways. Phones would dial numbers on their own, always to disconnected lines. Tablets would open to old photographs, images of people none of the guests recognized. But it was Maria, our head housekeeper, who made the connection. She'd been with the hotel since it opened in 1985, and she remembered the room's first occupant. An elderly woman named Elena Wright, who lived in the hotel for 12 years before passing away in that very room. Elena was known for hosting what she called her evening socials, gathering other long-term residents in her suite for tea and conversation. The pieces started falling into place. The multiple spirits, the sense of gathering, the strange attempts at communication. Room 417 wasn't just haunted. It had become a meeting place for the hotel's departed souls. They were trying to recreate Elena's socials, reaching out to the living in the only ways they could. I decided to spend a night in 417 myself. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, I checked in at sunset. The first few hours were quiet, just the usual hotel sounds filtering through the walls. But as midnight approached, the air began to change. It started with the armchair. Indentations appeared in the cushion, as if invisible people were taking seats. The temperature dropped in waves, cold spots moving around the room like guests mingling at a party. My equipment died simultaneously, batteries draining to nothing in seconds. Then I heard them. Not as voices, exactly, but as memories of voices. Fragments of conversations overlapping, decades of laughter and tears, and whispered confidences echoing through the space between worlds. In the mirror, shadows shifted and swirled, occasionally forming features I almost recognized from old hotel photographs. They weren't trying to fright anyone. They were lonely. Room 417 had become their sanctuary, a place where the veil between their world and ours was thin enough to feel the warmth of human presence again. Each terrified guest, each failed attempt at connection, only made their loneliness more acute. As dawn approached, I felt a gentle pressure on my shoulder, like a reassuring pat. The room gradually warmed, and the shadows retreated to their corners. I understood then what needed to be done. We didn't close room 417. Instead, we made it a feature. Now we offer it only to guests who specifically request a paranormal experience, who understand what they're walking into. Some flee before midnight. Others stay, sharing stories with invisible listeners, leaving small offerings, teacups, knitting needles, old photographs. The spirits seem content with this arrangement. The violent incidents have stopped. Sometimes, guests report pleasant encounters, the sensation of being tucked in at night, the smell of a leaner's lavender perfume, the sound of gentle humming from the bathroom. But here's what keeps me up at night. Room 417's population seems to be growing. More shadows in the mirrors, more voices in the recordings, more cold spots during the evening socials. And lately, I've noticed something else. When I pass by late at night, I hear music playing the same waltz that used to play at the hotel's grand openings in the 1980s. Sometimes, I wonder if Elinor planned this all along. If she chose room 417 specifically, sensing something about its location, its energy. If she spent those 12 years preparing it, turning it into a beacon for lost souls, a place where the lonely dead could find connection. And sometimes, in the deepest part of night, when the hotel is quiet and still, I wonder if room 417 is still accepting reservations. Not just from the living, but from anyone seeking one last evening of companionship before moving on to whatever awaits on the other side.